Emily Richardson couldn't sleep again. The sound was there, as it had been for the past 3 months. A low, endless hum that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. She sat up in her bed and looked at the clock. 3:24 a.m. As a geologist who had lived in Taos, New Mexico for the past 5 years, she had gotten used to the quiet desert nights. But now, that quiet was broken by something that most people couldn't even hear. She walked to her kitchen and made some coffee, knowing sleep wouldn't come back tonight. While the coffee maker bubbled, she opened her laptop and looked at the growing folder of data she had collected. Sound readings, dates, times, and notes from other people who could hear it. All of it pointed to something strange happening in her small town. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Bob Miller, a retired Navy man who had worked with sonar and underwater sounds for 20 years. He could hear it too. "It's stronger tonight," his message read. "Meet me at the usual spot." Emily grabbed her coffee in a travel mug and drove to their meeting place, the empty parking lot of the old supermarket on the edge of town. Bob's truck was already there, and he stood next to it with his own equipment spread out on the hood. "Look at this," Bob said as she walked up. He pointed to a screen showing sound waves. "The pattern's changing. It's not random anymore." Emily looked at the screen. The waves showed clear peaks and valleys, like a heartbeat on a hospital monitor. "How is that possible?" she asked. "Natural sounds don't make patterns like this." "They don't," Bob agreed. His face looked worried in the glow of the screen. "And here's something else. I've been marking down who can and can't hear it. It's only about 1 in 50 people, 2% of the population." Emily felt a chill that had nothing to do with the desert night air. "Have you noticed anything else? Any other effects?" Bob was quiet for a moment. "The dreams," he said finally. "I didn't want to mention it because it sounds crazy, but I've been having these dreams about huge empty spaces underground, like giant metal caves that go on forever." Emily's coffee mug almost slipped from her hands. "You too? I thought I was the only one." They spent the next hour comparing notes about their dreams. They were too similar to be a coincidence. The same metal walls, the same strange lights, the same feeling of something vast and important waiting to be found. As the sun began to rise, they saw another car pull into the parking lot. It was Linda Thompson, a local woman who ran the amateur radio station. She looked like she hadn't slept either. "I had to find you," Linda said as she walked up. "Something's wrong with all my equipment. The radio signals are going crazy, and it seems to happen in time with the hum." Emily and Bob shared a look. This was getting bigger than they had thought. Emily pulled out her phone and started making calls to other people who could hear the hum. They needed to get everyone together. Something was happening in Taos, something that went beyond a simple unexplained sound, and the small group of people who could hear it might be the only ones who could figure out what it was. As the morning sun lit up the desert, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The hum wasn't just a sound anymore. It was starting to feel like a message. And maybe, just maybe, they were meant to hear it. Michael Hayes stood in front of his empty high school classroom, setting up his equipment before the others arrived. The physics teacher had spent his savings on special sound recording devices after Emily and Bob had visited him last week. As one of the listeners, as they now called themselves, he knew he had to help solve this mystery. The door opened, and Emily walked in with Bob and Linda. They all looked tired, but there was excitement in their eyes. Michael had texted them earlier about his discovery, and they had come right away, even though it was Saturday. "Show us what you found," Emily said, putting down her coffee cup on a student's desk. Michael turned on his computer and pointed to the screen. "Look at this," he said. "I finally found a way to record the hum." The trick was to use 3 different machines at once and combine their data. On the screen, clear patterns appeared in blue and green lines. They moved up and down in perfect rhythm, like a dance that repeated every few minutes. "Natural sounds don't do this," Bob said, leaning closer to the screen. In all my years working with Navy sonar, I've never seen patterns this precise. Linda pulled out her own laptop. That's not all, she said. I brought my radio data from the past week. Michael, can you line it up with your recordings? They spent the next hour matching the two sets of data. The patterns were exactly the same. When the hum got stronger, the radio interference increased. When the hum changed its pattern, the radio signals changed in the same way. It's like a code, Michael said, or maybe a message. But who could be sending it? And why can only some of us hear it? Just then, Emily's phone rang. It was another listener, a teenage girl named Amy who lived on the other side of town. The hum, she said, her voice shaking. It's different today, and the dreams are getting clearer. Emily put the phone on speaker. Tell us about your dream, Amy. I saw numbers this time, Amy said. They were floating in the air inside those huge underground rooms, and I think I could read them. They looked like coordinates, but not like any I've seen before. Michael quickly wrote down the numbers Amy remembered. When he put them into his computer, everyone went quiet. The numbers matched perfectly with the patterns they were seeing on the screen. We need to go public with this, Linda said. Not yet, Bob warned. Think about it. If this is what we think it is, something beyond normal science, we need to be careful. The wrong kind of attention could make our work impossible. Emily nodded. Bob's right. First, we need to understand what we're dealing with. Michael, can you keep recording? And Linda, we need all the radio data you can get. I'll do better than that, Michael said. He walked to the back of his classroom and pulled out a large box. I ordered more equipment. We can give sets to all the listeners in town. The more data we have, the better chance we have of figuring this out. As they left the classroom that afternoon, none of them noticed the black car parked across the street. Inside, a woman in a dark suit spoke quietly into her phone. They're making progress faster than we expected. Yes, I understand. I'll keep watching. The sun was setting over the Taos mountains, and somewhere deep below the earth, something ancient continued to send its message, waiting for the right people to finally understand. The black government cars arrived on a Tuesday morning. Dr. Amanda Wells stepped out of the lead vehicle, her boots raising small clouds of dust in the high school parking lot. She had been watching the group for weeks, and now it was time to make contact. Inside his classroom, Michael was showing Emily and Bob his latest findings when there was a knock at the door. They all turned to see a woman in a dark suit standing there, holding up a Department of Energy badge. We need to talk, Amanda said simply, about the patterns you found in the hum. The room went quiet. Bob moved slightly in front of the computer screen, but Amanda smiled. Don't worry, she said. We're not here to stop you. We're here to help. Because what's under Taos is much bigger than any of you realize. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a large map. On it were marked dozens of spots where the hum had been reported over the years. When connected, they formed a perfect circle around the town. Last week, we brought in ground-penetrating radar, Amanda explained. Look at what we found. She showed them another image. It looked like an X-ray of the ground beneath Taos, showing something massive buried 2 miles down. What is it? Emily asked, leaning closer to see the image. We think it's some kind of facility, Amanda said. And it's old. Very old. The strange thing is, the metal it's made of doesn't match anything in our records. Michael pointed to his computer. The hum's frequency, he said. We found it matches something specific. It's the same frequency used in advanced quantum computers. Amanda nodded. That's why I'm here. The department has been studying similar signals around the world, but none are as strong as what's happening in Taos. And now, the signals are getting stronger every day. Just then, Linda burst into the classroom, out of breath. You need to see this, she said, turning on the TV mounted on the wall. The news was showing images of strange lights appearing in the sky over Taos Mesa. It's starting, Amanda said quietly. The activation sequence we've been worried about. Activation sequence, Bob asked. What exactly is down there? Before Amanda could answer, all the listeners in the room suddenly grabbed their heads. The hum had changed, becoming clearer than ever before. And with it came images, flooding their minds all at once. They saw vast halls of metal and crystal, machines waiting in darkness, and screens showing stars and distant galaxies. But most importantly, they saw what the facility was built for. It's a monitoring station, Emily said, her eyes wide as the vision faded. Built to watch for something. Something that's coming back. Amanda was already on her phone. Get the drilling equipment here now, she said to someone. And call Washington. Tell them it's just as we feared. The facility isn't just sending signals. It's waking up. As the group looked at each other, they could feel the hum changing again, becoming more like a heartbeat. Deep below their feet, ancient machines were coming to life, preparing for something they had waited thousands of years to detect. The truth about the Taos hum was finally emerging, but with it came a terrifying question. What exactly had their ancestors built this facility to warn them about? The drilling machines worked day and night for a week. Amanda had brought in the best equipment the Department of Energy had, but even their strongest drills could barely cut through the strange metal they found underground. Emily stood at the edge of the dig site, watching as another drill bit broke against the ancient material. Bob walked up beside her, holding 2 cups of coffee. Any progress? He asked, handing her a cup. Slow, Emily said, but the hum is getting stronger. Can you feel it? Bob nodded. All the listeners could now feel the hum in their bones. It wasn't just a sound anymore. It was like a pull, drawing them toward something deep below. Michael ran up to them, holding his tablet. You need to see this, he said. I finally finished analyzing those shared dreams we've been having. Look at the symbols we all saw. They're not random. On his tablet was a collection of strange marks that all the listeners had drawn from their dreams. When put together, they formed clear instructions, like a manual for some huge machine. Linda's voice came over their radios. Everyone to the main tent. Now, the sensors are going crazy. Inside the tent, Amanda and her team watched as their equipment showed massive energy readings coming from below. The hum had changed to a deep pulse that even non-listeners could now feel. It's not just a warning system, Amanda said, looking at the readings. The hum was a maintenance signal, keeping something dormant. And now, it's waking up, Emily finished. Suddenly, all the listeners grabbed their heads as a new vision hit them. But this time, it wasn't about the facility. They saw people, ancient people, working on huge machines. These people looked just like them, but they were doing impossible things with technology that seemed like magic. We're them, Bob said as the vision faded. Or at least, we're their descendants. They changed themselves, changed their DNA, so their children would be able to work with their machines. That's why only some people can hear the hum, Michael added. We're carrying their genetic changes. We were meant to be here when this happened. A loud rumble shook the ground. At the bottom of the dig site, a section of the metal wall simply disappeared, revealing a doorway. Steps formed out of the solid metal, leading down into darkness. Amanda got on her phone immediately. We've got access, she said. Send in the exploration team. But before anyone could move, Emily stepped forward. No, she said. It has to be us. The listeners. That's why we can hear it. We're meant to go first. As if to prove her right, lights began turning on down the stairway, but only the listeners could see them. To everyone else, it still looked dark. She's right, Amanda said after a moment. This is what we've been preparing for. The facility isn't just waking up. It's calling its operators home. Emily, Bob, Michael, and Linda looked at each other. They had all felt it, the growing certainty that they were part of something much bigger than themselves. Well, Bob said, checking his flashlight, shall we go see what our ancestors left for us? Together, they started down the steps. The hum grew stronger with each step, but now it felt welcoming, like a song they had always known but never heard properly until now. The truth about who they really were, and what they were meant to do, waited below. The underground hallway seemed to go on forever. Emily, Bob, Michael, and Linda walked carefully, following the lights that only they could see. Amanda followed behind them, recording everything on her special equipment. After walking for what felt like hours, they entered a massive round room. As soon as they stepped inside, the walls lit up with thousands of tiny lights, like stars in the night sky. "It's a map," Michael said in wonder. "A map of the galaxy." A new person joined their group, Tom Anderson, a former NASA expert who had arrived that morning. He was a listener too, and Amanda had called him in to help understand any space-related messages they might find. "Look at this," Tom said, pointing to a blinking light that was moving across the star map. "Something's coming. Something fast." The hum changed again, and this time it brought not just pictures but information flooding into their minds. Tom was the first to understand what it meant. "It's a warning system," he said, his face going pale. "This whole facility, it was built to warn us about something specific, something that travels between the stars." More lights came on, showing a large screen on one wall. Strange symbols appeared, but somehow the listeners could read them now. It was like remembering a language they had known in a dream. "This can't be right," Linda said, reading the numbers. "According to this, whatever's coming is moving faster than light. That's impossible." "Maybe not for them," Bob said quietly. "Look at these readings. Whatever built this place, our ancestors, they knew things we've only dreamed about." Emily walked to another part of the room where a pedestal had risen from the floor. When she touched it, more screens lit up around them. "These are defense plans," she said, looking at the new information. "They knew something was coming, something dangerous. They built this place to help us fight back when it arrived." Amanda was quickly taking notes on her tablet. "How long do we have?" Tom studied the moving light on the star map. "Based on its speed, 3 months, maybe less." Suddenly, all the listeners felt a new sensation. It wasn't just information this time. It was like a key turning in a lock inside their minds. New abilities were waking up, things their ancestors had built into their DNA. Michael pointed to a series of symbols that were now as clear to him as English. "There are more facilities like this," he said, "all around the world. They're all starting to wake up." "But why now?" Linda asked. "Why didn't they activate before?" "Because we weren't ready," Emily said, understanding coming to her. "Our ancestors knew we needed to develop on our own, to reach a certain level of technology. If they had given us everything at once, we might have destroyed ourselves." The hum grew stronger, and more systems came online throughout the facility. Above ground, people were reporting strange lights and sounds from other parts of the world. "So what do we do now?" Bob asked. Amanda stepped forward. "We need to tell the world's governments, but carefully. If people panic." "No," Emily said firmly. "First, we need to learn everything we can. Our ancestors left us these tools for a reason. We need to understand them before we can explain them to others." The hum pulsed again, like a heartbeat getting stronger. Time was running out, and they had a lot to learn. 2 weeks had passed since they first entered the facility. The room that had once seemed huge now felt small compared to what they had discovered beyond it. The underground complex stretched for miles in every direction. Emily stood in what they now called the history chamber. The walls showed moving pictures of Earth's past, telling a story that changed everything they thought they knew about human history. "They're ready," Bob said, walking in. Everyone's gathered in the main room. Leaders from different countries had finally arrived after reports of similar facilities activating around the world. It was time to explain what they had learned. Emily walked into the main room, where 30 important people sat waiting. Amanda stood nearby with armed guards, making sure everything stayed calm. Tom worked at a control panel, preparing to show what they had discovered. "Thank you for coming," Emily began. What we're about to show you will seem impossible, but every word is true. Tom activated the display, and the room filled with holographic images. They showed Earth 50,000 years ago, when their ancestors had built these facilities. They knew about a pattern, Emily explained. Every 50,000 years, something happens in our galaxy. A species of beings arrives from far away. They hunt developing civilizations, taking their technology and destroying their worlds. The images showed other planets, other races, all destroyed by something massive and terrible. The people in the room watched in shock. Our ancestors fought them, Bob continued. They built weapons and defenses throughout the solar system. But they knew they wouldn't survive. So they made a plan for the future, for us. Michael stepped forward. They changed their own DNA, making sure their descendants would be born with the ability to understand and use their technology. That's who we are, the listeners. We carry their knowledge in our genes. Linda pointed to the moving dot on the star map. They're coming back. In less than 3 months, they'll reach our solar system. But this time, we're ready. Tom showed new images, massive defense systems hidden throughout the solar system, waiting to be activated. The hum wasn't just a warning, he said. It was a wake-up call. These facilities are preparing us for what's coming. One of the world leaders stood up. How can we trust this? How do we know these ancestors of yours weren't the threat? Emily touched the control panel, and new images appeared. They showed the ancestors' final days, their sacrifice to give humanity a chance to grow and develop on its own. They could have controlled us from the beginning, Emily said. Instead, they let us develop naturally, only leaving these facilities as a last defense. They trusted us to be ready when the time came. The room was quiet as everyone took in what this meant. Humanity wasn't alone in the universe, and now they had to prepare for their greatest test. We need to work together, Amanda said to the leaders. Every country, every nation. What's coming doesn't care about our borders or our differences. The hum grew stronger, as if agreeing with her words. In other facilities around the world, more listeners were waking up to their abilities, preparing for what was coming. The time for secrets was over. Now, they had to get ready for war. 1 month had passed since the world leaders learned the truth. The skies above Earth now looked different, as hidden defense stations rose from the oceans and emerged from mountain ranges. The Taos facility had become the main control center for everything. Emily stood at the main control panel, watching as more listeners arrived from around the world. Each one found their place naturally, their inherited memories telling them exactly what to do. Latest report from the moon base, Bob said, walking in with a tablet. The ancestors had hidden facilities there too, and they were now fully active. The defense grid is at 80% power. Michael and Linda worked with teams of scientists, teaching them how to use the ancient technology. It wasn't easy. Only listeners could fully understand it, but they found ways to work together. Tom burst into the room. They've changed course, he said, pointing to the star map. They know we're awake. They know we're ready for them. The hum changed its tone. Every listener in the facility looked up at once, receiving the same message. Emily was the first to understand what it meant. They're not slowing down, she said. They're speeding up. They'll be here in 2 weeks, not 3 months. Amanda, who had become the link between the listeners and the world's governments, immediately got on her phone. Tell everyone to speed up preparations. We're running out of time. But something else was happening too. As the threat got closer, the listeners' abilities grew stronger. They could now share their thoughts without speaking, work as one mind when they needed to. Look at this, Linda said, showing them a new set of readings. The facilities aren't just defense stations. They're trying to tell us something else. Emily placed her hand on the main control panel. Suddenly, she could see what Linda meant. The ancestors hadn't just built weapons. They had hidden their greatest discoveries, waiting for the right moment to share them. They knew, she said softly. They knew that facing this threat would unite humanity. Make us work together in a way we never had before. The room filled with new holograms, showing technology that could solve Earth's biggest problems. Clean energy, food for everyone, ways to heal the planet. But they would only work if humans stayed united, kept working together. It was all a test, Bob realized. The threat is real, but fighting it is only part of the challenge. They wanted to see if we could come together, put aside our differences. Through the windows, they could see lights in the sky. Defense stations taking their positions. Around the world, people watched and waited. For the first time in history, all of humanity faced the same challenge together. "Are we ready?" Amanda asked. Emily looked at her friends, then at all the listeners working throughout the facility. She thought about how far they had come since those first nights of hearing the mysterious hum in Taos. "We're ready," she said, "not just to fight, but to become something more. Something our ancestors knew we could be." The hum rose to a pitch that filled the air with energy. Deep in space, ancient defense systems powered up. The next chapter in human history was about to begin. And it all started with a simple sound that only a few people could hear in a small town in New Mexico.